This chapter is predominantly a prelim centric topic. So the discussion is mostly centered around prelims topics. Having said that, we are going to discuss mains questions as and when there is a necessity. Okay. So let's start with external sector. Chapter number 4. External sector deals with all those transactions that a country makes with the other countries in the world. Okay. If all these transactions are accounted, we come across balance of payments. Balance of payments is an account of all the transactions a country makes with other countries. When I say all the transactions made by all the stakeholders in an economy, including government, business, and private individuals or private consumers. So when all these transactions are accounted in an account, that account is considered as balance of payments. However, these transactions are categorized into two accounts: current account and capital account. Okay. Current account transactions are those transactions where the transactions do not create any asset or liability on behalf of either of the transaction parties. On the other hand, capital account transactions are those transactions which create asset or liability on behalf of either of the transaction parties. Let's say trade. Every country trades with other country, either exports or imports. Okay. So exports and imports do not create any asset or liability on the transaction parties. So as and when the good and service is delivered and the payment is received, the transaction is settled. There is no asset and liability here. In the same way, factor payments. What are factor payments? The payments that are received for providing factors of production, like wage or salary or interest income. Interest income is earned for the loan given to somebody, or profits are made if you invest in a business. And rent. These payments are known as factor payments. These factor payments are the payments that are provided or that are paid in the process of provision of factors of production, various factors of production. Okay, land, labor, entrepreneurial capital, all these services will provide these payments. And transfer payments. Transfer payments are those payments which are provided for free of cost, like subsidies, grants, gifts, remittance payments. These payments are known as transfer payments. They do not involve any liability nor the asset, or they do not involve exchange of any good and services in return for the payment. Example, remittances, foreign aid, gifts. These payments are known as transfer payments. Okay. So if you look into these transactions, either the trade transactions or the factor payments or the transfer payments, they are recurring. They are paid regularly, and also they are not creating any asset or liability. You will better understand their nature once you get into the capital account transactions. Okay. Foreign investment. Foreign investment comes into India in three ways. One, foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, or foreign venture capital investment. Okay. These are the three ways in which foreign investment comes to a country. If you see, this foreign investment is creating a liability on the person who is investing in our country, isn't it? So this transaction is creating creating an asset. So this transaction is creating an asset. In the same way, external commercial borrowings. Let's say Indian companies are raising loans from foreign sources or the foreign banks. It is creating a liability for the company which is raising the loan from the foreign source, and also this external commercial borrowing is creating an asset for the bank which is creating loan to an Indian company. So in either ways, either it is creating an asset or the liability on the transacting parties. So this is a capital account transaction. Or bank deposits, non-resident bank deposits. We have wide range of bank deposits, NRO, NRE, FCNR deposits. All these deposits are made by foreign residents in Indian banks, isn't it? So they become liability for the banks which are receiving the deposits, isn't it? So they are also creating liabilities. So that is why it is considered as a capital account transactions. So as a whole, all the transactions made by all the stakeholders in an economy with the other countries are either categorized as current account transaction or capital account transaction based on its nature, which means if it is creating asset or liability on either of the transaction parties, it is considered as a capital account transaction. If it doesn't, it is considered as a current account transactions. And why are we discussing this balance of payments in the first place is that we are going to discuss this economics, the external sector chapter in account wise. First, we are going to discuss the current account transactions. First, we are going to discuss trade, transfer payments, and we'll go into the foreign investment, external commercial borrowings, and foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investments. And in the meanwhile, we also solve multiple MCQs as and when there is a necessity. Okay. So, first of all, let's start with this trade. So before going to the trade portion, let's answer some questions. The basic questions. The balance of payment of a country is a systematic record of A. All important export transactions of a country during a given period of time, normally a year. Goods exported from a country during a year. Economic transactions between the governments of one country to another country. Capital movements from one country to another country. You can give the answer in the comment section. All the important export transactions of a country during given period of a time. This was a question which was asked in the previous year question paper. As such, sorry, I'm really sorry. Economic transactions between, my bad. Economic transactions between the government, sorry, not even the government. This question was asked in previous year prelims question paper, and it is much beyond what is given in the current account. It also includes current capital account transactions, but this is the best possible option in all these four options. So you can go with option A. Second, which of the following does not form part of the current account of balance of payments? When you give answer, please write the question number as well so that I can understand whether which question are you answering. Which of the following does not form a part of the current account of balance of payments? Export and import of goods, export and import of services, foreign portfolio investment, income receipts and payments. Which does not form a part of the current account transactions? Is foreign portfolio investment. It comes under capital account. Okay. Next, another question, previous year question which was asked in 2013. Which of the following constitute capital account? Foreign loans, foreign direct investment, private remittances, portfolio investment. Foreign loans, of course, it is creating a liability. Foreign direct investment, it is creating an asset. Portfolio investment, same in the case of foreign direct investment, it is a type of foreign investment. Private remittance is not a capital account transaction, isn't it? So the answer is 1, 2, and 4. Okay. So now that we are done with the basics, let us look at the trends of the trade. Okay. See, the extent of a trade a country makes is generally measured in its trade openness indicator. trade openness indicator. Trade openness indicator is ratio of the total amount of trade as a share of its GDP. The amount of total trade as a share of its GDP. Total trade includes both exports and imports. So trade openness is measured by sum of exports and imports as a ratio of nominal GDP of a country. Which means, let's say in India, in 2022, India made total trade of 50% of its total GDP. We are talking about both exports and imports. So the extent of trade is measured as a ratio of total trade with GDP. Okay. So it is 50% last year, and this year, in the preceding financial year, that is 23 to 24, it has come down to 46%, almost 46%. As such, there is a huge scope of improvement because the global average is hovering around 62%. Okay. So let us understand, of course, the latest data is not available for the global average, but I'm sure it is significantly higher than India's share of trade with respect to its GDP. Okay. So let us understand the possible reasons why there has been a slump in the trade to GDP ratio. First and foremost, disruptions in the global shipping routes. See, last year, we have seen disruptions in the global shipping routes, mainly because of Houthi rebellion across the Red Sea, across this Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which created huge disruptions along the Suez Canal, as a result of which all the freight that is going into the country or coming into the country had to take a detour across this Cape of Good Hope to reach the markets in Europe and North America. So this has increased the time and cost of transport, free transport. That has definitely impacted our exports and imports with the other countries. See, let me remind you, Suez Canal is very important. Almost 20% of the global trade passes through Suez Canal. Okay. So anything that happens to these choke points will inevitably impact the global trade between the countries. So this is one of the major reasons why our trade has reduced. Trade to GDP has reduced last year. Again, the second factor is the elections. See, we are not talking about Indian elections alone. 2024 is the year of global elections. It is the year of global elections. More than 70 countries went for elections this year, or they are yet to go for elections in the 2024. So what kind of impact these elections would have on global trade? See, elections will make the governments sensitive to the political or popular issues. As a result, they are more likely to take nationalist policies like protectionist measures. They may raise import tariffs. They may impose export controls to reduce the inflation in their domestic economy. So, import tariffs or export ban. If you remember, Indian government also imposed export ban on important commodities like onions from time to time. So whenever there is inflation or the dearth of supply in the market, pulses, onions and wheat or non-basmati rice, these kind of commodities are restricted from being exported. So as a result of which our exports are going to be declined. In the same way, just imagine if the 70 countries this year, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Japan, even important European countries which are our major trading partners like France, UK, Germany, all of them went to elections, as a result of which, as a result of nationalistic policies or as a result of protectionist tendencies that have arisen out of the elections, definitely reduced our export potential. So these are the reasons why we witnessed reduced trade. Okay. Now, trade includes both exports and imports. Okay, trade includes both exports and imports. So let us understand the overall trade performance, and we'll get into the composition of the trade. Okay. See, this is overall India's trade performance in the last 10 years. The brown line represents imports, whereas the blue line represents exports. The exports are around $778 billion, whereas the imports are $853 billion. If you see our exports, we are talking about the overall exports. Our exports are always lower than our imports, which means we always registered negative trade balance in the last 10 years. We have registered negative trade balance consistently in the last 10 years. That means every year the exports are less than our imports. Okay. What is our target for exports? Our target for exports is to increase to $2 trillion by the year 2030. So in the next 6 years, we have to improve by $1.3 billion, isn't it? So surprisingly, there is a target for exports, but there is no such target for imports. Have you seen? So why is that exports are superior to imports for an economy? So why is it always countries often talk about exports and how good they are at the exports rather than imports? Which means exports are definitely beneficial to an economy. So let us first start with the significance of exports for an economy. GDP growth. Exports create demand, exports open new markets, and exports results in increasing the production activity in a domestic economy, isn't it? So that will definitely improve the GDP growth rate. We have seen this after liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms in India after 1990s. When the borders were opened, when the trade restrictions were reduced, our trade to GDP ratio increased. As a result, GDP growth also increased. So we have even seen double-digit growth in the early 2000s only because of the exports, isn't it? Next, employment opportunities. Of course, more exports, more production activity, as a result of which more employment and more demand. So better employment opportunities. And accumulation of forex reserves. See, forex reserves of an economy can be accumulated through multiple ways, through exports, or through foreign investment, or through NRA deposits in our banks, or through external commercial borrowings. The exports is the only way in which forex reserves can be accumulated without any liability. See, foreign investments are repatriable. Any foreign portfolio investment coming to India has to go back. They're pretty volatile. Even the semi-permanent foreign direct investment is a liability. It has to be repatriable at some point of the time. External commercial borrowings, they definitely give us forex reserves, but again it creates a liability. It creates external debt, isn't it? Exports is the only way where we can accumulate forex reserves, without creating any liability on the government or liability on the economy. Okay. Again, forex reserves are very important because only through these exports we earn the forex reserves and we can meet our important imports from the other countries, especially the crude oil, okay, which is a lifeline for our economy. Next, foreign investment. Rising exports it attracts foreign investment, okay, and recovery from recession. What is this? See, during recession times, which means during negative GDP growth rate in an economy, the aggregate demand reduces. So the demand reduces. So when the demand reduces, the production activity comes to a halt because there are no consumers for the goods and services that are produced in the economy. So for each and every manufacturer, they need to find a new consumer. So exports give that opportunity. Exports give a new market for the manufacturer, and they make the wheels of the economy run even during recession stage. So even during even during recession stage, they can still make the money by exporting their products, goods and services to the foreign countries. So this is the best way of rising exports is the best way of recovering an economy or pulling an economy out of recession. Okay. So these are various significance of exports or various benefits of exports and competitive domestic industry. See, as long as there is no competition, as long as the domestic manufacturers are only catering to domestic customers, there is no incentive for them to enhance their efficiency and produce or deliver the services or goods at a very competitive or cheaper price. When they are exposed to the global competition, when they are trying to export their products in the global market, they rise or they enhance their efficiency, as a result of which the prices of goods and services that are being produced will come down. So this is also a good news for the domestic consumers as well. Okay. So these are the various benefits of exports, and that is why each and every economy would try to achieve more and more exports as as much as possible. So given their importance, let us look at the share of or the performance of the exports in India. See, export performance. The share of exports in the total world merchandise exports is 1.8% for India. So India is exporting 1.8% of total goods that are exported in the world. In the same way, the share of India's service exports in the world's commercial service exports is 4.4%. See, as a share, our share in world service exports is much higher than our share in the merchandise exports or goods exports. Okay. If we combine them together, both goods and services, our share in the total exports of the world is around 2.4%. That means out of the total exports, 2.4 exports are originating from India, and there is a high scope for us to achieve, perform better, isn't it? So let's get into the goods exports or merchandise exports. First of all, exports. Let's talk about the merchandise trade, which includes both merchandise exports and imports. See, our merchandise exports, our goods exports, are around $437 billion, and our imports are $675 billion. And if you see, in the last 10 years, our merchandise exports are always lower than our merchandise imports, which means we have run a negative trade balance with respect to our merchandise sector. And it has been consistently true for the last 10 years. See, in 2015, it was minus 138 and it is minus 238, which means the difference between our merchandise exports and imports have only widened in the last 10 years, and we have consistently registered negative merchandise trade balance in the last 10 years. Okay, this can be a statement. First of all, to get into the reasons why we are faring bad or not performing so well in our exports, let us understand the nature and composition of our merchandise exports. Okay, first we'll discuss merchandise exports, and then we'll discuss service exports, and then we'll go to the other transactions of current account. Okay, let's start with merchandise exports. First, let's understand. Let's look at the major export items from India. Petrol products, followed by electric machinery and equipment, followed by gems, stones and jewelry, machinery and mechanical appliances, which means engineering goods, pharmaceutical products, automobiles, chemicals, textiles and apparels, iron and steel, cereals. Okay. Generally, these are the major merchandise exports from India. Okay. And these are the major export destinations for India. The USA is the by far the largest export destination for Indian products, followed by UAE, Netherlands, China, and UK. Of course, the ranks are not constant; they keep on changing from financial year to financial year. But again, USA is far ahead of any other country when it comes to our exports. Okay. So let us understand the nature of our exports. The nature. If you understand the nature of exports, you will understand why the exports are performing the way they have been performing. Okay. First of all, they are capital and skill intensive. Look at the exports. Petroleum products. Petroleum products are capitally intensive exports. They are produced as a byproduct in the form of in the process of refinery, in the refinery oil refinery companies. Electric machinery and equipment, gems, stones and jewelry, pharma, chemicals, iron and steel. They are not labor intensive industries except for textile and cereals. There are hardly, of course, slightly automobile. There are hardly any labor intensive industries. Most of the products are capital and skill incentive. Okay. And second, they are very much linked to our imports. You will understand this better when you compare our basket of exports with basket of imports. See, these are the major merchandise exports from India, and these are major merchandise imports by India. Now let's compare them. What are the major the biggest item of export? Petroleum products. Petroleum products, the products which we make in the process of refinery, in the process of crude oil refine. But crude oil is imported, isn't it? All the electric machinery and equipment that we make, for manufacturing of these equipment, we need to import inputs from other markets like China. See, we don't have semiconductors. We cannot make transistors, isn't it? So for making of any electronic goods, we have to procure inputs from other countries. Jewelry. Again, for jewelry, we need gold and diamond. Pearls, stones, and precious metals are imported. The same way, pharmaceutical product. I know India is a big player in terms of producing generic medicine, but again, we have to depend upon China for active pharma ingredients, which is a key input for making generic medicine, isn't it? So, they also depend upon the imports. The same way, even for cereals, what is the key input for agricultural commodities? Fertilizer, isn't it? Fertilizers. For chemicals, the inputs are sourced. So for each and every major export item, we are heavily depending upon our imports. So what is the takeaway from it? So why this point is important? See, whenever our rupee value depreciates, we often consider that is going to help our exports, isn't it? Because let's say $1 equal to 70 rupees last month and it has come down to 80 rupees, which means our exporters are going to earn more money because of the depreciation of the rupee, isn't it? But in Indian case, generally it is a classical thumb rule that depreciation of currency is definitely going to help its exporters. But Indian case, it may not be true in all the cases because the depreciation of currency will also make our imports costlier. So it is not necessarily that this is going to help our exports. Okay, so that is why understanding the nature of exports is very important. Okay, and lack of diversification of export basket. Again, look into the major export item groups. Petroleum products, electric machinery, gems and jewelries, other mechanical appliances, pharmaceutical products. The top 5 products, the top 5 exports comprises more than almost 50%, around 47% of our exports. If you include the top 10 exports, they make up around 75% of our exports, which means we are just relying upon 10 products for exports. So look at the composition of our exports. And it is not something that that is very new. It has been the case since last 10 years, and it is going to become more and more less and less diversified over the period. It used to be the top 5 products, the top 5 export commodities used to comprise of around 40% of our exports in the financial year 2015, but by the year 2019 it has become 42.2, and now in the financial year 24 it has become around 47%, which means around half of exports are only 5 goods, which is a cause of concern. Why? Because if something or the other happens in one sector, that is definitely going to impact our overall export performance. So for a stable and better export performance, for robust exports, we need to diversify our exports. So that is also one of the reasons why we fail to make our exports resilient, okay, and income elastic, sorry. See, every good has a demand or a particular demand in the market. Okay. Well, that demand is not constant. It keeps on changing, isn't it? So, the demand of a product or a good depends upon 2 factors. 1, price. 2, income of the consumer. See, 1, price of the commodity. 2, income of the consumer. If the price decreases, demand increases. And also if income of the consumer increases, demand for the products increases. However, price sensitive goods are different from income sensitive goods. Some goods are more sensitive to price. If the price decreases, their demand increases automatically. But some goods are more income elastic, which means their demand doesn't depend much on the price, but rather much on the income of the consumer. If the income of the consumer increases, the demand will automatically increase. Okay. Most of our products are income elastic products. Most of our exports are income elastic exports, but not price sensitive exports. See, the problem with this is that our exports do not depend upon our cost competitiveness rather than economic performance of our export trading partners, which means if we are exporting to USA, UK or UAE, if their economy is not in a good shape, if their per capita income declines, demand for our products are going to be declined. Even if we can provide them, even if we provide at a very competitive price, even if we are going to export them at a very competitive price. So income elastic products or income elastic exports do not depend upon only our cost competitiveness, but also the economic performance of our trading partners as well. And also income elastic goods are not going to show better sensitivity to currency value as well. As we have discussed, depreciation of rupee is not going to impact very significantly to our exports because our exports are not cost competitive rather than income elastic. Okay. So understanding this nature of our, understanding these characteristics of our exports will throw a better light, or will make you understand why and how our exports are performing the way they have been. Okay. Okay. See, again, coming to the destinations, our destinations are, the top 5 destinations are high income countries, Europe, North America, and rich countries in the Asia. Okay. We are yet to penetrate our markets to South America and Africa. Our export to Africa is hardly 10% of our total exports. South America is yet to be penetrated. Okay. So there is a potential for us to diversify our products, our export products, and also our export markets. So that is the key takeaway from this chart. Okay. Okay. Let's see what economic survey has talked about in this year. Economic survey has talked about with respect to India's export performance. India's economic survey said that India has registered significant increase in exports in particularly 4 products: defense exports, footwear, mobile phones, and toys. You might have remembered the PM Narendra Modi had given a clarion call for us to consume Indian made toys and reduce the import of toys. Okay. So India has made remarkable increase in exports of these products in the last 2 to 3 years. Okay. Significantly the last year, financial year 23 to 24. Okay. The major reason for this is production linked incentive scheme that has been extended to all these sectors. PLI scheme, you might have heard about it, but before discussing PLI scheme, let's answer some questions. Which of the following is not a major exporting commodity from India? Petroleum products, gems and jewelries, drugs and pharmaceuticals, palm oil. Which of the following is not a major exporting commodity? Okay. It is palm oil. The rest of them are major exporting commodities, and palm oil is the major importing commodity for India. Okay. Look at the fifth question. With reference to the international trade of India at present, which of the following statements are correct? The merchandise trade balance of India has been consistently negative in the last decade. Isn't it? Yes. The merchandise trade balance has been consistently negative in the last decade. Our exports, merchandise exports are way lesser than our merchandise imports every year. India's merchandise exports are more than its merchandise imports. Of course. No. India's exports of toys and footwear have decreased in recent years. Definitely no. Toys and footwear have significantly showed remarkable resilience or remarkable increase in the last 2 to 3 years. Okay. So the answer is one only. Okay. Production linked incentive scheme. Please give the question number when you're answering the question. There is a slight delay, so it takes a little bit of time for me to read your answers. Please mention the question number as well. Okay. So there has been remarkable increase in our exports in specific products, and economic survey cited this scheme as the main reason. Production linked incentive scheme. Government of India had constituted a scheme, production linked incentive scheme, to boost manufacturing sector in India. Okay. See, manufacturing sector in India has been plagued with many infrastructural issues and other issues. Okay. As a compensation to those issues, government has started providing incentive to the manufacturing sector or manufacturing industries. Okay. So the main objective of production linked incentive scheme is to boost domestic manufacturing, reduce imports, create employment, and also enhance competitiveness in the global market, thereby increasing our exports. Okay. And what does government do in this scheme? The government is going to provide straight financial incentives to the manufacturers. Straight up. They are going to provide financial incentives in the form of cashback offer. Okay. So directly the financial incentives are credited to the bank account of the manufacturers. Isn't it? Then what is the criteria to receive these financial incentives for these manufacturers? See, the eligible criteria is incremental sales, incremental investment, and incremental turnover. So what are these incremental sales and incremental investments? For example, let's take a manufacturing company is producing 100 goods in the base year. Okay. A manufacturing company is selling, let's say, 100 amounts. Let's say a mobile manufacturing company is selling 100 mobile phones in the year 2019-20, because this is the base year and we need a base year for measurement of incremental sales and incremental investment. Okay. Let's say in 2019, a manufacturing company has sold 100 mobile phones, and in the financial year 2023, the same company has sold 200 200 mobile phones. So the increase in the sales is considered as incremental sales. Increase in sales is considered as incremental sales. So the money is given as a share of the incremental sales to the manufacturing company. Okay. The same incremental investment, if a particular company has made, let's say 100 crore investment in the base year 2019-20, and it has included or it has made fresh investments in the following years, that fresh investment is considered as incremental investment, and the same thing goes for incremental turnover. As such, the criteria is not same for each and every sector, because now the PLS scheme is extended to almost 14 sectors. The criteria different from one sector to the other sector. For example, let's say for mobile manufacturing companies, the criteria is incremental sales and incremental investment. For other sectors like what do you call textile sectors, the criteria is incremental turnover. Okay. No matter what, the financial incentives are given based on incremental sales. Financial incentives are given as a share of incremental sales. 4% of incremental sales or 5% of incremental sales. For example, if a company has made incremental sales of 100 crores, the company would receive 4 crores as a cash incentive from the government of India. Okay. So, as we said, it has been included in the earlier. It was initiated only for few sectors like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, but it has been extended to almost 14 sectors in the previous 4 years. So let us answer this question. Which of the following statements are correct about production linked incentive scheme? Okay. The scheme aims at boosting domestic manufacturing in India. Yes, right. Incentives under the scheme are applicable to those companies who make incremental exports over the base year. Incremental exports. Is it right? No. See, in India, there is not even a single incentive scheme which is linked to the export performance. Though the idea or the objective is to make our products competitive and enhance our exports through PLI scheme, there is no such criteria as incremental exports. See, any scheme or any incentive scheme which is linked to the export performance is going to be violative of WTO agreement on subsidy and countervailing measures. So it is going to be attracted, it is going to be questioned in the WTO dispute and settlement body. So there is no such export condition with respect to PLI scheme. Okay. The scheme is applicable to only domestic companies. Is it? No. The idea is to bring more and more investment, and it enables even foreign companies to come and establish their manufacturing units and take advantage of this scheme. So there is no bar on foreign companies to come into India and establish their manufacturing plants and taking advantage of the scheme. It is applicable to both domestic and foreign companies as well. So the third statement is also wrong. The incentives are provided in the form of tax exemptions. No. Incentives are provided straight up in the cash payment. There are no tax exemptions under this scheme. So the answer is A. Okay, we'll discuss more about PLI scheme in the next class, where we discuss manufacturing sector. Okay. Next, a question which was asked in 2023. India accounts for 3.2% of the global exports of goods. No, you remember it is 1.8%. India's share of merchandise exports in the overall exports is 1.8%. Okay, the statement 1 is wrong. Look at the statement 2. Many local companies and some foreign companies operating in India have taken advantage of the India's production linked incentive scheme. Right? Okay. So statement 1 is correct. Statement 2 is, so statement 1 is incorrect. Statement 2 is correct. Okay. Now let's come to the service exports. See, first of all, let's look into the major the composition of our service exports. The major service exports are telecommunication, computer and information services, all the IT sector, IT exports. Other business services include all kinds of professional services, legal services, architectural services, all kinds of business and professional services that are provided from India. And travel and transport, financial services like banking services, fund management services, asset management services, personal, cultural and recreational services, which includes tourism, health and wellness services. So all these come under personal, cultural and recreational services. So these are the major service exports from India. And let's look at the trend of the service trade. See, unlike merchandise exports, service exports are always more than their imports. See, if you compare our service exports with merchandise exports in absolute terms, service exports might be much lesser than merchandise exports, because merchandise exports are to the tune of around $430 billion, but service exports are only $340 billion. But service trade has always been positive in the last 10 years, and it has always been positive. Service trade balance has always been surplus in India, because our service exports are way higher than, or significantly more than, our service imports, and that is true for all the last 10 years. Okay, this can be a statement. Please answer the question number 8. Which of the following are considered as service exports from India? Okay, please read the question. I'll explain you how to answer this question. A foreign tourist visiting India, a branch of an Indian bank located in foreign jurisdiction providing services to its foreign customers, an Indian resident architect working for a foreign project, a foreign shipping company transporting Indian goods to foreign countries. Which of these are considered as service exports? See, there is always a thumb rule to understand whether a particular cross-border service is considered as service export or not. That thumb rule is this: the service provider should always be domestic individual or domestic entity, whereas the service consumer is foreign individual. Only then that service delivery is considered as service export, isn't it? Okay. So these cross-border services are categorized into 4 types under WTO, General Agreement on Trade and Services. Okay. So let's understand what are the 4 modes of service delivery in the across the borders. First, cross-border service. See, in the cross-border service, or in this mode of service, neither the service provider nor the service consumer is going to cross the border, but it is the only service that is going to be exported. Let's say distance learning, BPO services, online medical help, online education, any other kind of service, online consultancy services. Here, neither the consumer nor the producer nor the provider is crossing the border. Okay. The second mode is consumption abroad. In this mode, only the person who is consuming the service is crossing the border, but the person who is providing the service is not crossing the border. This is known as consumption abroad. Best example is tourism. All kinds of tourism, medical tourism, students coming for higher education, students coming to India for higher education, or tourists coming to India. All these are consumption abroad service exports, isn't it? And the third mode refers to commercial presence. In this case, Indian domestic entities open their branches in the foreign locations to cater to their foreign customers. That means they are providing the services by opening a commercial presence in the foreign location. For example, an Indian bank opening its branch in other country and serving its foreign customers. So that is mode 3 delivery of service export. And the fourth is movement of natural persons. Here, in this case, on contrary to the consumption abroad, the service provider is going to cross the border. For example, an IT engineer going to foreign country for a project, or a doctor going to a foreign country to perform a surgery, or an architect going to a foreign country and contributing towards a project. So all these are come under this mode of service exports. Okay. So these are various types of service exports. Now answer this question. A foreign tourist visiting India, yes, it is a service export. A branch of an Indian bank located in foreign jurisdiction providing services to its foreign customers. Of course, the provider is domestic entity and the consumer is foreign entity. An Indian resident architect working for a foreign project. Yes. Read the fourth statement. A foreign shipping company transporting Indian goods to foreign countries. See, the common thing in these three statements is that the service provider is Indian and service consumer is a foreign entity or foreign individual. But here in this case, the service provider is a foreign shipping company. Even though they're transporting our goods exports, but the service is being provided by a foreign entity, a foreign shipping vessel. So that is considered as service import, because the service consumer is Indian and service provider is the foreign entity. So that is considered as service import, rather a service export. So the answer is 1, 2 and 3. Okay. Question number 9. Which of the following statements are correct about service exports from India? Telecommunications and IT service sectors contribute the most to the service exports from India. Yes, if you remember, this is the major item of service exports from India. Telecommunications and IT services. So the first statement is correct. India has witnessed positive service trade balance consistently in the last 10 years. Is it right? Yes. Look at the service trade performance of India in the last 10 years. It has been consistently positive. So answer is both 1 and 2. Okay. C. Okay. So the next topic is global value chain. The next topic is global value chain. So we are done with merchandise exports, merchandise trade and service trade. Okay. So first of all, we'll discuss why we are discussing global value chain. Economic Survey has specifically talked about global value chain, and Economic Survey has been advocating for India to integrate itself in the global value chain over the last 2 to 3 years. Okay. And this topic is become all the more important in the recent time because of China +1 strategy. So we'll discuss what is the strategy and what global value chain has something to do with China +1 strategy from the point of view of India. Okay. First of all, let's start with global value chain. What are global value chains? The global value chains refers to those international production sharing where operations are spread across the national borders. They are not located in one country. So generally, in the traditional way, the goods are manufactured in one location. But in the modern day world, the goods are manufactured. There are various stages in the goods manufacturing, right from the designing to manufacturing of key inputs, assembling, marketing, customer support. There are different stages in the life cycle of a product, isn't it? Now each and every aspect is being outsourced to a particular country where the country can show its expertise and cost advantage. So let's understand through an example. Let's say let's take a mobile manufacturing company like Apple. Okay. First and foremost, the Apple as such is being designed in USA, somewhere in California, isn't it? And the manufacturing starts somewhere in China, because the China has abundant resources of all the rare minerals that are required for manufacturing of these inputs. Okay. And it also has technology to manufacture semiconductors. Okay, semiconductors and other processors. So they are coming from China because China has cost advantage with respect to these two aspects of the production of entire manufacturing, mobile phone manufacturing. And let's take the inputs like accessories like camera. Japan has cutting edge technology and it is able to produce quality cameras with at a very cheaper price. Okay, so cameras are sourced from Japan and assembling is done in India where we can provide relatively cheaper labor. Okay, and since we are good at software as well, so the software is also provided in India. Probably marketing is done in Europe. And customer support is provided from India. So various aspects of this goods manufacturing, various aspects of the manufacturing of a good is outsourced to various locations where each and every location or each and every country can show their advice, can show their expertise and provide the goods at a very efficient and cost effective price. Okay. The whole idea of global value chain is to increase the efficiency, and the cost advantage, and to reap the benefits of cost advantage. Okay, so that is why multinational companies are choosing this method of production sharing, international production sharing, rather than the traditional sharing production method, production process of producing the whole good in a single location. Okay, now see, we know global value chain process is more beneficial for the multinational companies point of view. But why do we have to care about global value chain? See, there are multiple benefits out of it. First and foremost, if India becomes part of this global value chain, or if India integrates its in the global value chain, our exports are going to be enhanced. It will increase our exports. The global value chain by their nature are going to eventually improve exports for any domestic country if the country becomes a part of the global value chain. See, every product that comes to a country which is a part of the global value chain will eventually go to the other country for further value addition, which means it will have to improve it will definitely or eventually improve the exports, isn't it? And investment. Becoming a part of such global value chains will bring more and more foreign investment, because India come up with assembling. India can attract investment in the assembly, where it can show a cost advantage because of our cheap labor cost. Okay, if you remember, if you know, more than 11% of the total Apple production originated in India last year. $11 billion exports of iPhones originated from India last year, because it has become a part of the global value chain, isn't it? You don't have to manufacture the whole mobile phone in our country. You just have to be a part of the global value chain where there is a significant value addition in our location, isn't it? And one more important advantage is technological dissemination. It will improve technological capability of our domestic manufacturing industry. See, how is this going to help us? So I'll explain you through a case study. See, 4 decades back, before LPG reforms, Government of India had established a public sector automobile company. A public sector automobile company, you might have heard about Maruti Udyog Limited, a public sector automobile company. Okay, see, there was demand for vehicles, cars, and government thought that why not we establish a public sector company in the automobile sector as well. See, this Maruti Udyog Limited, of course, we didn't have the technology to completely manufacture the whole car or whole vehicle in India. So they have made a joint venture with a Japanese company, Suzuki. Okay. So Suzuki had the technology, but they didn't have the enough labor resources. So what they did, they used to transfer their engines and other key inputs to Maruti Udyog Limited located in India, and Indian PSU used to manufacture or assemble these inputs and export the automobiles. So this joint venture helped increasing our exports initially. Okay, so just like how other countries are being taken, are taking advantage of the global value chains, we have started taking advantage of it long back, few decades back. In fact, the Suzuki company started increasing their investment more and more. So they increased their investment to almost 50% in the next decade. Okay. Later on, what they figured out is that they also transferred the engine making technology to the Maruti company, with which it had a joint venture located in India. See, by the time we have already established our ancillary industries like steel, glass and rubber industry. We have cheap labor, we have skilled labor as well. All that we need is technology. So Suzuki has transferred the technology because of the joint venture, and Maruti started producing the whole vehicle in India, and they started exporting. So that's how we got Maruti Suzuki. So this is a classical example of how integrating with global value chain will eventually impact or enhance our technological capability, which will give a boost to the domestic manufacturing sector in India, isn't it? So these are the benefits, why Economic Survey has been advocating India to become a part of the global value chain. Okay. So why are we discussing, why is it all the more important now in the last 2 to 3 years? Because global value chain concept as such is not new. It has been there in the last 1 or 2 decades. Why is it all the more important now? This is because of China plus one strategy. So what is China plus one strategy? You might have heard about it. You might have read it in the newspapers. China plus one strategy is a strategy adopted by the global manufacturing companies, to diversify their supply chain beyond China. See, China is considered as factory of the world. Most of the sector, take any sector, take pharma sector. 60% of active pharma ingredients are coming from China. So the whole pharma industry, global pharma industry, depend upon China for key inputs. The same thing goes for electronic industry. Semiconductors are coming from China. Same thing goes for automobile industry. Steel comes from China. Cheaper steel comes from China, and engines are coming from China. So there are many manufacturing sectors, many industries who exclusively or excessively depend upon China for their key inputs. Okay. So the world has come to realize this over reliance on China for their manufacturing inputs during COVID pandemic. When pandemic happened, of course, due to the disruptions created by the pandemic, the global manufacturing industry had come to a halt. Not just because of the COVID pandemic in their countries, but also because of the supply chain disruptions that had resulted out of this pandemic. They didn't have any other source to bring or procure the raw materials and intermediary goods or key inputs that is important for their manufacturing industry. So then they started diversifying their supply chain sources. They started diversifying their supply chain. Okay. So this is known as China plus one strategy. See, this COVID pandemic is just an ignition. It is not just the only reason why the global companies have started diversifying their supply chains beyond China. There are other issues. One is geopolitical tensions. We have seen increasing tensions between USA and China in the recent past, isn't it? The result of it is economic sanctions and trade tariffs, trade wars, and economic sanctions. We have seen USA slashing high import tariffs and sanctions on Chinese imports. Okay. See, the problem is this will create problems to these MNCs who have been depending upon the China, because this is going to increase their cost of manufacturing. The geopolitical tensions, the political tensions between US and China is going to ultimately hurt the global value chains all the multinational companies who are depending upon the China for their key inputs, isn't it? So this is also one of the reasons they're trying to de-risk their investments from China. The other is rising cost of labor in China. If you remember, China in the last 2 decades or 3 decades became a manufacturing hub owing to their cheap labor, apart from the technological capability, apart from the infrastructure abilities. But with rising incomes and with rising standard of living, China is no more able to provide the same kind of cheap labor that it used to provide a decade back. And that is the reason why we have seen increasing shift of labor intensive industries like leather and textiles to more cheaper countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam, isn't it? So even the labor cost of labor is also increasing in China, and that is also one of the reasons why they're trying to diversify their investments away from China. And environmental and labor concerns, MNCs are no more cannot afford to engage with China, especially in the wake of increasing allegations against labor violations, labor laws violations, and human rights violations in their manufacturing industries. So it has become only more and more difficult because of all these reasons for the multinational companies to engage with China, and they're trying to diversify their supply chain, and they're trying to diversify the investments away from China. And they started doing it already. We have seen increasing imports to USA from Vietnam. Earlier it used to be China. Vietnam has replaced China in most of the sectors recently. Okay. So this made these global value chains important, because in the context of China plus one strategy adopted by the global companies, what measures that India can take to position itself as a viable alternative by effectively integrating into global value chains. Now you understand why the global value chain topic is all the more important in the wake of the China plus one strategy, because it is time for us to show us or to position ourselves as a better alternative to China for all these global manufacturing companies and make their investment. We can better do it only by integrating India with global value chains, existing global value chains. And how do we do it? That is the question. That is the answer for this question. Okay, let's discuss. So the measures needed to integrate India into global value chain. First, changing our orientation from cost efficiency to capability advantage. What does it mean? See, traditionally, India has been looked at as a cheap labor economy, and any foreign investment that comes to India comes with an understanding that this market is going to give us cheap labor so that we can reduce our cost of operations. Of course, apart from the 1.5 billion population market, we have a huge market in terms of our population as well, but primarily it is because of the cheap labor. But India cannot take advantage of this cheap labor for more than a decade. See, our demographic window is going to be ended probably in 10 more years because of the changing total fertility rate, changing demographic statistics. And not only the demographics, the reason is mostly the rising standard of living. See, India is no more a low income country. Now it is a middle income country, aspiring to become a higher income country. So with rising standard of living, with rising per capita income, it is no more easier for us to provide the same kind of cheap labor that we used to provide a decade back. Or probably we may able to provide right now, but we may not able to provide after a decade. The same thing what happened with China is going to be repeated in India as well. So that is why we have already seen this trend in labor intensive sectors like textiles. We have lost our textile market to Bangladesh and Vietnam, who are able to provide cheaper labor compared to India, because the standard of living in India has increased, the GDP per capita has increased. So first and foremost, rising cost of labor in India is a reason. Rising cost of labor in India is a reason why we cannot take advantage of this cost efficiency anymore, and India cannot project itself as a cheap labor country for more than a decade, isn't it? And second thing, we have seen improving technological advancements in the manufacturing as well. We have advanced manufacturing technologies like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, Internet of Things. So these advanced manufacturing technologies will eventually reduce the reliance on the labor. Artificial intelligence, 3D printing, Internet of Things, all these, the fourth industrial revolution in a way. The fourth industrial revolution may not need the kind of labor that the third industrial revolution had needed, isn't it? So in that case, India cannot showcase itself as a better alternative to China in the coming decade, isn't it? So why are we discussing about this now? In the wake of China plus one strategy, we have to showcase ourselves as a better alternative. How do we do that? We have to integrate into the global value chain. And where do we do it? In which industries we have to do it? Not in labor intensive sectors anymore. Probably we'll have a good green run for next 1 decade, but that is going to with that advantage is going to be ended in a decade. Now we have to look at those sectors where there is a need for technology, where there is a need for skilled labor as well, like pharma, like pharmaceuticals, electronic sector, electronics manufacturing, electronic goods manufacturing sector. These are the sectors where semiconductors, prioritize those sectors where there is need for technology so that we can grow up the value added chain, isn't it? See, take the case of Maruti Suzuki case study. First they started with assembling, then they didn't have any technology, but they still positioned themselves in the global value chain, and slowly they upgraded or they acquired the technology from their partners, and they have become self-reliant in the manufacturing of the automobile. And the whole vehicle is being manufactured in India, and India has become a significant exporter of automobiles because of the technology, isn't it? So these sectors are more important, and these are the sectors which are going to play a crucial role in the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, so we have to understand and we have to showcase those sectors, and we have to concentrate on those sectors which can attract investments in these aspects. Okay, next, infrastructure development. See, for any foreign investment to come to India, they need all weather market connectivity within the domestic territory and across the national borders. These two are important. First of all, let's talk about our domestic territory market connectivity in the domestic territory. See, in India, logistic costs are so high, as a result of which the cost of manufacturing of goods and services are high, as a result of which our products become uncompetitive in the global market. So that is one of the reasons which are hindering our export potential, isn't it? So the logistic cost in India is way higher than the global average. The logistic cost in India is around 18% of GDP, where the global average is 8% of the GDP. Which means, what is GDP? The value that we are creating, the value of the final goods and services that we are creating in the economy. Out of the total value, 18% is going towards logistics cost. And now we understand why the Indian domestic manufacturing sector is not able to perform well. So why? What is the issue? Look at the logistics sector, especially the connectivity. The connectivity, keeping the storage sector and other sectors, storage issues aside, connectivity is the biggest issue. In India, our connectivity is our free transport is more diverted towards more dependent upon the railway transport. All the capital goods like coal, cement, steel, oil, other fuels, even food grains that are transported by the Food Corporation of India, they choose free transport, they choose rail transport. As a result of which, the cost of transport is pretty high. Only the fast moving consumer goods, the FMCG sector depend upon the road sectors. Otherwise, most of the capital goods still rely upon the railway transport or the railway freight. But we know that because of the cross subsidization, our railway freight is pretty costlier and also very slow, because of the congested network. Okay, so it is very important for us to improve our multimodal connectivity, cheaper, reliable transport, add waterways, significant waterways, construct dedicated freight corridors. Green corridors are also important. Dedicated freight corridors supplied by renewable energy resources. They are important for multimodal connectivity. This market connectivity within the domestic economy is all the more important for attracting any foreign investment. Okay. And second is international connectivity, international market connectivity. See, what happened with the Suez Canal crisis last year or the Bab el Mandeb Strait? There are few choke points, the Panama Canal or the Malacca Strait or Bab el Mandeb Strait. Any geopolitical tension will eventually congest these choke points, and that will lead to supply chain disruptions, just the way it happened in the last 1 year. Okay, so now we need alternative all-weather connectivity. So we need to expedite these international connectivity projects. See, again, we're coming back to the same argument. China plus one strategy's main argument is to avoid supply chain disruptions. How do you avoid supply chain disruptions when you have choke points like this? So to avoid supply chain disruptions, we have to avoid these choke points. So we need alternative trade connectivity. So this is North-South transport corridor. This is India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Either of these two will avoid this route. Okay. So we have to expedite our efforts in joining and completing these internationally connectivity projects, which will establish resilience in the supply chain. Okay. Next, tariff simplification and tax rationalization. Tariff simplification. See, a research report by ex-chief economic advisor Arvind Subramaniam revealed that India had enhanced its import tariffs on more than 3,000 items in the last 10 years. More than 3,000 imported items. That's a big thing. Okay. And India has started imposing anti-dumping duties as well on a lot of products. Okay. And this is not a good sign if you want to become a part of global value chain. If you want to become a global value chain, your tariffs should be very flexible and simplified. You cannot end up having anti-dumping duties. You cannot end up imposing anti-dumping duties and expect foreign investments and expect become a part of global value chain, because global value chain needs seamless flow of goods and services across the borders, and these kind of trade barriers are not going to help in any way, isn't it? So we need to simplify our tariffs. Okay. And tax rationalization. This is the biggest issues with respect to our tariffs. Inverted duty structure. What is inverted duty structure? Inverted duty structure is that situation where tax on final product is less than the tax on input. Tax on input is more than tax on final product. Okay. So if the tax on input is more than the tax on final product, it is always cheaper to import the final product rather than importing the key input and manufacturing it in the Indian economy. So this will encourage imports. This is going to encourage imports, but not exports, but not domestic manufacturing. This is also not a good sign, because this is going to make our domestic manufacturing much more costlier compared to the same product that is being produced by other countries. Okay. So it is high time, and inverted duty structure is, that is witnessed in many sectors. That is witnessed in textiles. It is witnessed in engineering goods as well. Recently, engineering goods exports lobbying. They try to lobby the finance ministers to remove this inverted duty structure. Okay. So tax simplification and tax rationalization is also important if you want India to find a place in the global value chain. And skill development, as we have discussed, the manufacturing sector is being evolved. Even we have seen change in our export composition. Our exports have become more and more skill incentive. So if you want to expand it further, the only way out is skill development. The semi-skilled cheap labor is no more a unique USP of India. Okay. Next, removing FDI restrictions. This is interesting. And Economic Survey has openly, categorically talked about opening Indian market for Chinese foreign direct investment. See, we have seen, we have understood China plus one strategy. So we know that the North American companies and European companies started sourcing their key inputs from other countries like Vietnam, Singapore, Mexico, or in the case of Indonesia or India, and they're trying to divert away from China. But this cannot completely deter or decouple China from the international manufacturing sector. Even, see, the interesting thing is that the exports from Vietnam increased to USA compared to the China, but Chinese foreign investment also increased in Vietnam, which means China is rerouting their exports to these other countries. So in a way, it is impossible to decouple Chinese investment or Chinese business from the manufacturing sectors or from global value chains. So we have to accept Chinese investment and all the other benefits that make arise out of it, like technology. That is more important. Okay. So we have to remove FDI restrictions that we have already imposed, especially with respect to the investment from China. See, after pandemic in 2020, government has released a press note called Press Note 22, Press Note 3. We call it Press Note 3, PN3. Under this press note, they have made some changes to the foreign FDI policy. According to this order, all the states or all the countries which shares land borders with India, if the investment is coming from any country that is sharing land border with India, they cannot come under automatic route. They have to mandatorily come under approval route. See, FDI comes under two routes: automatic route and approval route. Okay, approval route requires more bureaucratic approvals. Otherwise, automatic route is more seamless. After pandemic, Government of India had tweaked its FDI policy and said that any investment coming from, especially China, this policy was actually targeted at China, only China. Any investment that is coming from China should have to come only under approval route, but not under automatic route. But now Economic Survey is saying that to done away with such restrictions for foreign investment, because it is openly arguing for attracting more and more Chinese foreign investment. So decoupling from China is a myth. Okay. So remove more and more FDI restrictions. So these are the measures that India has to take to become a part of GVC, or to integrate its economy into the larger global value chain and position itself as a better alternative to China in the wake of China's +1 strategy. So this is the question. I'm sure you can answer this question. Okay. Next. So trade is done. Let's start with remittances. See, India is the highest remittance receiving country in the world. It's not just here, it has been since last 5 years. India has always been the largest remittance receiving country in the world. Okay, it is around $120 billion, $120 billion, which is slightly higher than the last year's number, which was around $110 billion. Last year it was $110 billion. So there is there has been a significant increase, 10% increase, around 10% increase is a significant increase. Okay, so how and what are the reasons for these robust remittance flows into India? This is important. You can expect an MCQ on these topics. Okay. First, rise in global oil prices. How come rise in global oil prices is going to impact our remittance flows? Simple. Gulf cooperation countries are the major source of remittance inflow into India, because most of the migrant workers go to these Gulf countries, and their economy and their demand for labor in these countries depend upon the oil prices. If the oil prices are increasing, it will definitely increase the demand for the labor from India, and it will definitely increase the remittance flows into India. So whenever there is increase in the global oil price, then in that financial year we have seen increasing remittance flows into India. Okay. And second, India UAE cross-border payment in local currency. See, UAE is one of the major source of remittance to India. 18% of remittance inflows comes from UAE. It is the second biggest source country for remittance inflows for India. And recently we have made a deal with UAE. India has made a deal with UAE to conduct the cross-border trade in local currencies. So you might have heard about local trade in cross-border trade in local currencies. Okay, so this is being done in rupee and dirham. So this process has made the sending of remittances much more cost and time effective. So this reduced the time and cost involved in sending the remittances. This reduced the time and cost reductions in sending the remittances from UAE, and that also helped in increasing the remittance flows. Okay, and UPI has been enabled in UAE. Okay, so all the migrant workers can now send their remittances to India through UPI. So this facilitated the smooth flow of remittance income. Okay, and exchange rate. Now tell me, what is the impact of exchange rate on remittance flows? So if rupee depreciates, when rupee depreciates, remittance income increases. So this is the thumb rule. Rupee value decreases, remittance income increases. That means if a foreign migrant worker is, let's say, earning $10 and the dollar value is $1 value is 70 rupees, he would send 700 rupees. But if the dollar value increases and the rupee value depreciates to $1 per 80 rupees, then the remittance income will increase to 800 rupees. So when the rupee value depreciates, the remittance increases, and it has always been proved. See, in the last 6-7 years, if you see, whenever there is increase in the exchange rate with respect to the USD, which means rupee value depreciated, okay, then we have seen increasing remittances. Okay, largely there has been a positive association between India's exchange rate and India's remittance inflows. So this can be asked in the prelims. Okay. Next, deceleration of inflation in US. See, how come control of inflation in US has resulted in more remittance inflows to India? See, earlier, 2 decades back, most of our remittance inflows used to come from Gulf cooperation countries. Okay, most of our migrants used to go to such countries. Okay, that is the reason. Now our migrant work pool has been diversified, and they're going to different countries, European countries and North American countries, USA, Canada, UK, Australia. So now our migrant pool is more diversified, and the best advantage of this diversified migrant pool is stable remittance flows. Even if the global oil prices are going to be declined, we still get good remittance flows because our migrant income, our remittances income is not just coming from one region or one particular country. So the more diversified our migrant pool, the more diversified our remittance sources, the stable our remittance inflows. That's it. Okay. Now USA is by far the largest remittance source of India. It is not any Gulf country. It is actually the US. So we have seen increasing skilled labor going to countries like USA and UK, and we have been receiving increasing remittance inflows from these countries. And now it is USA the top remittance source of India. Okay. So whenever there is decrease in the inflation in USA, there will have the remittance, the migrant workers will have more disposable income at their hands to send back home. That's it. So that is the reason why we have seen robust remittance inflows, especially an increase of $10 billion in the last 1 year because of these reasons. Okay. Now let's solve some questions. Which country is the largest source of remittance to India? It is United States. Okay. USA followed by UAE. Okay. 10th question. Which of the following statements are correct about remittance inflows to India? India is the highest remittance receiving country in the world. Correct. Around half of remittance flows to India come from United Arab Emirates. No, wrong. The highest is USA, where around 30% of remittances are coming from USA right now. And for UAE, it is just 18%. Definitely not 50% for any country, of course. Rising global oil prices hurt the remittance income into India. Wrong. Rising global prices may increase the remittance income into India, but not the other way around. Okay. So the answer is one only. The answer is C. Okay. Let's get to the next. Now that we have discussed trade, transfer payments, let's look at the factor payments. Factor payments has always been negative for India, but that is very insignificant. It doesn't account much to the overall current account deficit. It doesn't contribute much to the overall current account deficit. So let's look at the current account deficit. See, trade includes both exports and imports, isn't it? Exports and imports. Generally, we always run negative trade balance, including both, if you include both merchandise and services. Okay. So we always have negative trade balance. Okay. Transfer payments, mostly the remittance income. So it is always, the net remittance flow is always positive and very significant. So it is always positive. Okay. The net factor income tend to be generally negative. Okay. Tend to be negative. I'll show you. See, this is the net factor income. Minus, it's hardly to the tune of $10 billion every year. So it is hardly $10 billion every year. Okay. It doesn't contribute much to the overall current account deficit. You know what is the biggest contributor to the overall current account deficit? It is this. See, $242 billion of trade deficit. It cannot be compensated by anything. This is only, we are talking about only the merchandise trade. Again, $163 billion are coming from service exports. These are net remittance flows. So even our service exports and net remittance flows are not able to overcome this. Okay. So trade deficit is the biggest contributor for current account deficit. Okay. So we have, see, this green line is the current account deficit. So look at the percentage. As a percentage, right now it is around 0.6 percentage, 0.6 to 0.7 percentage, which has been well within a good range. Last year it was around 2%, but we have improved. Now it has, the current account deficit has been narrowed down. Current account deficit has been narrowed down because you can see that here. The service exports increased. Service exports, the service trade balance, net service trade balance increased, and also net merchandise trade balance also reduced. So this has reduced the negative trade balance or the trade deficit. It has reduced the trade deficit, as a result of which the overall current account deficit has been reduced. So that's it. That is the key takeaway from this. Current account deficit, we always run current account deficit. We hardly register current account surplus. See, if the balance of current account is either can be positive or negative. If it is positive, we call it as current account surplus. If it is negative, we call it as current account deficit. In India, almost all 90% of the times we register current account deficit, except in some rare occasions. This what happened in the year financial year 2021. It was the COVID year. So COVID year, the manufacturing sector had come to a halt, as a result of which we could not import anything. Above that, we also exported medicines and other medical devices. So as a result of which we have relatively better, not so bad trade balance, and also remittances remained very good, as a result of which in this only 1 year there is current account surplus. Otherwise, in the last 10 years, 9 out of last 10 years, India has registered current account deficit. Okay. Now let's answer a question. Which of the following is not considered a part of current transfers in the balance of payments? Remittance sent by the migrant workers, humanitarian aid received from foreign agencies, profits received from foreign investment, gifts and donations from foreign sources. See, current transfers means transfer payments, nothing else. Transfer payments in the current account are regarded as current transfers. So don't get confused. So again, remittances, again a transfer payment. Humanitarian aid received from foreign agencies, it is a transfer payment, of course. Gifts and donations from foreign sources, it is a transfer payment. Profits received from foreign investment, what kind of payment is it? Please write it down. What kind of payment it is? Factor payment. This is a factor payment. Okay. So the answer is C. C. This is the right answer. Which of the following is not considered a part of current transfer? Next, question number 12. Which of the following statements are correct about current account balance of India? Current account balance of India. India has consistently witnessed current account deficit in the last 10 years. Not correct. India has seen current account surplus in the financial year 21, the COVID year. So not consistently. Merchandise trade is the biggest component that contributes to the current account deficit in India. Yes, if you look at the chart, it is always the merchandise trade, the blue portion, which contributes to the trade the overall current account deficit. It is always the merchandise trade deficit. Okay. So merchandise trade is the biggest component that contributes to the current account deficit in India. Okay, the answer is 2 only. Okay. Next. Current account is done. Let's start with capital account. Okay. Capital account, foreign investment. Foreign investment comes in 3 ways. Foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, and foreign venture capital investment. Isn't it? Foreign venture capital investment is very insignificant, so there is hardly any content about it. So let's concentrate on foreign portfolio investment and foreign direct investment. So let's see what has been the trend of foreign portfolio investment in the last 1 year. Okay, this is very important from prelims point of view again. See, net FPI flows into India. Look at this chart. Financial year 2024. Just look at the significant jump. So last year the net FPI inflows is negative, which means there are more outflows than inflows. But this year, $44 billion. In fact, the highest in the last 10 years. India has received highest net FPI inflows in 2024. Record level. What happened? What exactly happened last year which facilitated this record level increase in the net FPI inflows into India. This begs for a question definitely. So the reasons is Indian economic growth. See, sometimes FPIs are very volatile. You don't need solid reasons for FPI inflows and FPI outflows. It hardly, merely runs on the sentiment. It merely runs on the sentiment, and sentiment is very volatile, and it can be turned around in 1 quarter or 1 financial year. Okay, so look at the economic growth. India has registered a very good economic growth, more than 8%, almost 8%, and it is much better than most of the emerging market economies. It is one of the fastest growing economy in the world, and that has created animal spirits in the market, and that resulted in net FPI inflows into India. Fair and square, that's it. It creates a positive sentiment, especially when other countries are not performing well in their economic indicators. That's it. That is enough for us to say, turn around the sentiment in 1 financial year. So this is the major reason, Indian economic growth. Okay. Of course, there are other reasons which are important. Decline of US bond yield. This is also one of the important reasons why we have seen increasing FPI inflows into India. So let us discuss this, how it impacts, how US bond yield would impact Indian market. Okay. Okay. So what is a bond yield? Let's say, take a case. There is a person A who purchased a bond. The bond value is, let's say, 100 rupees. Okay. This is the face value. This is the face value. And its coupon rate is, let's say, 5%. Its coupon rate is 5%. Is it? Which means coupon rate is interest. Coupon rate is interest rate. Okay. Coupon rate is always a fixed amount which is fixed to the face value. It has nothing to do with the market value. Okay. Which means the rate of return is 5 rupees. 5 rupees, let's say, per month. Okay. After, let's say, a year, let's say this transaction was taking place in the year 2023. In the year 2024, the person A want to sell this bond to a person B. Okay. But the person B, person A said that he wants to sell this bond at a higher price than at which he has bought. That means at a market price which is higher than face value. Okay. Let's say this particular person has purchased it for 102 rupees. 102 rupees. This is the market price, isn't it? The market price is, or the market value is 102 rupees. But the coupon payment would remain the same, because coupon payment is 5% of the face value. It is always fixed to the face value. 5% of the face value. It is a fixed income. So the coupon payment would remain the same, which is the same 5 rupees. So this person B is receiving a return of 5 rupees upon the investment of 102 rupees, which means the yield has definitely increased. The yield here is 5%, isn't it? But here the yield has definitely decreased to, let's say, it's hardly less than 5% at least. It is less than 5%. So the yield has declined here. Yield declined. Simple. Let's take case 2. Same thing. In this, the same person in 2023, let's say A has purchased a bond whose value is 100 rupees, which means this is the face value. Okay. Here the coupon rate is, let's say, 5%. 5% of what? 5% of the face value, which is 5 rupees. Okay. This person has sold it to somebody else next year, person B, and this B has purchased it for a market value which is less than the face value, which means there is no demand for the bond. The Mr. A wanted to get rid of his investment. That is why he is searching for seller. So sorry, some buyer. So this buyer has quoted a price of, let's say, only 95 rupees. Let's say 95 rupees. Okay. So 95 rupees is the market value now. Its market value is 95 rupees. And the coupon payment would remain same because it is fixed to the face value. So how much is getting? 5 rupees. So he is getting a payment of, he is getting a return of 5 rupees for 95 rupees, whereas this person used to get 5 rupees for 100 rupees of investment. So here the yield is 5%, but here the yield is greater than 5%. Greater than 5%. It is more than the 5%. That means yield increased. Yield increased. So yield of a bond is the rate of return earned by a new investor when the bond is purchased in the secondary market. That's it. So these are the two cases. Yield either can be increased or decreased on a bond. Okay. Why does it happen? See, there are two ways actually. See, bond yield either decreases or increases. Okay, let's take this case. Why does it decrease? Why bond yield decreases in the earlier case? Because the market price increased. The market price increased above the face value, isn't it? So market price for the bond increased. Market price increased. Why market price increased for the bond? There must be a reason why market price would increase. The reason is there is more demand for the bond. There is more demand for the bond. Probably there are no better alternative opportunities for the investment. Probably this is the best rate of return that is giving for the investors. So that is why there is increasing demand for the bond, as a result of which market price increased. Isn't it? So as a result of which the yield reduced for the new investor. Why there is demand for this bond? Because there are no better alternative opportunities in the market. That means interest rates are decreasing. Interest rates are low. Low interest rates in the market. Why there are low interest rates in the market? Probably the RBI has taken expansionary monetary policies. What is expansionary monetary policy? That monetary policy which try to increase the supply of the liquid in the market, thereby to kickstart the demand, to increase the aggregate demand in the market, or to increase the growth rate in the market. Okay. This happens when there is disinflation. When does central bank conduct expansionary monetary policies? When the inflation is under control, or when, so that when the inflation is under control, it has to accommodate for the growth of the economy, or to revive the economy, or to increase the demand for the economy when there is disinflation or there is deflation. So the inflation is properly under control. So under these reasons, the demand for the bond increases because there are no better alternatives for the investment. The interest rates are already low. The banks are also not giving better interest rates. So the demand increases, as a result of which market price increases, as a result of which bond yield decreased. That's in the case 1. Okay. Let's take the case 2. What happened in the case 2? Here, the bond yield increased. Why? Because market value decreased. The market value is 95 rupees. It used to be 100 rupees and it decreased to 95 rupees. So the first thing is market value decreased. Why does it happen? Why market value decreases? Because there is no demand for the bond. Why there is no demand for the bond? Because there are better alternative investment opportunities in the market. That means there are better alternatives which can give us better interest rates.
So which means interest rates are high in the market already. High interest rates in the market. So there is nobody to take up for these bonds. High interest rates happens when RBI conducts contractionary monetary policies. Contractionary monetary policies. Okay. When does RBI do it? When there is inflation. When there is inflation, it tries to reduce the supply and also thereby controlling the demand and reducing the price rise. Okay. As a result, the demand for the bond decreases. The demand for the bond decreases because interest rates are high. Instead of investing in the bond, probably I would invest in the bank. Okay. So the market value decreases. As a result, bond yield increases. So this is how bond yield decreases and increases. If you remember in the previous slide, when we were discussing about the increasing remittances flows to India, we have discussed about one reason, that deceleration of inflation in US has definitely impacted increasing remittance flows to India, which means inflation reduced, deceleration of inflation, which means disinflation. So inflation rate used to be 4% or 3% earlier. Now it is hardly 2% or 1%. As a result of which, what happened? The demand for the bonds increased and market price increased and bond yield, US bond yield decreased. Which means for the fresh investors, it is not desirable to invest in the US bond. Rather, it is much more easier for or better remunerative for them to invest in bonds of other emerging market economies like Turkey, Mexico, and India, where they offer or they give better rate of returns. And that's what happened in India case. So because of the inflation, deceleration of the inflation, decline of bond yield happened. The bond yield reduces, US bond yield reduced. As a result, we have seen increasing NPF, FPI inflows into India. So this is also one of the reasons. Okay. And the other reason is inclusion of Indian government in the JP Morgan bond index. This is again it's a watershed moment in the Indian's financial market, especially with respect to the Indian government bond. And we'll discuss what is this briefly and we'll solve some questions. First and foremost, to understand what is this JP Morgan bond index and know what happened and what are the advantages that India is going to get out of inclusion of India's government bond in the JP Morgan bond index, we need to understand what exactly is a bond index and what is its significance and what is its purpose. Okay. Bond index is actually a basket of multiple bonds belongs to a similar category. And this bond index measures the performance of all these bonds. And these bonds represent a segment of a much larger market. See, I'll just explain it briefly. Let's say you as an individual investor wants to invest in in the bond market. Okay. So you can choose either corporate bond or the government bond. Let's say you want to invest in the government bond. So you are a global investor who invests in multiple markets. Let's say you want to invest in Indian, let's say Turkey government bond. But again, the rate of return depends upon a lot of factors. First and foremost, the market value of the bond. Second, the coupon payment. Third, the bond yield. Okay. And all these factors depend upon the domestic economic scenario of the Turkey. Okay. So when they want to invest in Turkey government bond, they are liable, they're exposed to risk. So it is a very risky thing to invest in any other emerging economy bond. Though they offer better rate of returns, but it's slightly risky. So what do? Instead of relying upon one particular set of instrument, you try to diversify your investments into multiple bonds so that your risk exposure is going to be toned down a little bit. How do you do it? Let's say you have $100. Instead of investing all $100 in one bond, you better invest in a bond index. A bond index comprises of multiple bonds of the similar segment. So there are different bond indices for different segments. Government bond index, corporate bond index, or Nifty, separate bond index for financial institutions, separate bond index for, let's say, a separate corporate companies like, automobile companies or textile companies. So you will have a separate bond index for separate segment. Okay. They take the first, there is a separate bond index for emerging market economies. JP Morgan is a globally renowned investment firm which has been managing this bond index known as emerging market bond index. Emerging market bond index. It comprises of bonds of all the emerging markets, 20 emerging markets. Okay. So if anybody invests in this bond index, that money is split into 10 parts and that is being invested in all the bonds of this 20 parts, and they are invested in all these 20 countries according to their weightage. Okay. So for example, if I have to invest, if I'm investing $100 in the JP Morgan bond index, this $100 will be split into 20 parts and invested in bonds of all these countries: India, China, Indonesia, Mexico, Malaysia, ranging from Turkey to Egypt, all these 20 countries. And your net rate of return depends upon the overall performance of the bond index. That means overall performance of all the bonds. Even if one or two bonds may not perform well, the negative losses will be averaged out by the positive benefits or profits that may be erased out of better performance of the other emerging economies. So bond index is basically a risk hedging strategy for investors. That's it, nothing else. Okay. So bond index is always a beneficiary for the investor. So let's look at the bond index. A bond index is a basket of bonds that belong to a similar category of segments. Example, government or corporate. So there can be a separate government bond index or there can be a separate corporate bond index. This index measures the performance of all the bonds in the index based on their market value, interest income and yields. Okay. The overall performance, overall rate of returns depends upon the overall performance of all the bonds. Even if some bonds may not perform well, but it will give you some assured rate of returns. Okay. It enables the individual investors to reduce their risk. So JP Morgan has been managing a bond index called emerging market bond index, comprising of bonds of all the emerging economies, and it has been doing since many years. And Indian bond has never found a place in this market index, in this bond index, and this happened this year, in the year 2024. It has already started. It has been just 2 months. It has been almost a month since they started giving us a place in their market index, in their bond index. Now tell me how it is important. By the way, not all the bonds are given the same weightage. If I'm as an investor, if I'm investing $100 in this bond index, it doesn't mean that this $100 is split into 20 equal parts and invested in 20 equal proportions in all the bonds. The investment is given or invested in the proportion of the weightage given to the particular bond in their bond index. Accordingly, India has got 10% weightage, which is a very significant, the highest weightage is given to the India. Apart from India, China and Indonesia, only the other two countries which has this significant weightage. That means any global investor who is investing $100 in this JP Morgan emerging market bond index, $10 will eventually come to the Indian market, or $10 will be eventually invested in the Indian bond. Okay, so we are talking about only the government bond. Okay, it's a government bond index. So this is the benefit of finding a place in the global bond index. There are multiple benefits out of it. See, this is the reason actually why we have seen significant net FPI inflows into India. As such, let me tell you, the bond index inclusion has happened just last month, but the decision has been taken in the year 2023 itself. The decision itself has given much confidence to the investors on Indian government bond, because the JP Morgan investment firm might have taken into considerations all the factors that are associated with Indian government bond, and if they have placed it in their index, it means this bond is really working fine. So that is a that is signal to the investors to easily to invest in Indian government bond. So this has resulted in increasing net FPI inflows into India. Okay, let's also discuss the advantages that we are going to get out of this inclusion of JP Morgan, inclusion of Indian government bond in JP Morgan bond index. So you can find a prelims question on this. First of all, it reduces the cost of borrowing for the government. Why? Why does it reduces the cost of the borrowing for the government? See, right now, we are actually, whenever the government wants to borrow, it issues government bonds. And these government bonds are purchased by domestic investors or the foreign investors. In the domestic economy, mostly the banks purchase government securities and other primary dealers purchase, and retail investors like you and me also can purchase. Apart from this captive domestic market, government bonds are also purchased by foreign portfolio investors. But the foreign portfolio investment is not so very significant. Okay. Now just imagine, after finding a place in the global market index or the bond index of JP Morgan bond index, any investment that is coming into the bond index, 1/10 is going to come into the government bond, or 1/10 is eventually going to come into the government invested in the government bond. So now the source of borrowing increased. Since the source of borrowing increased, the cost of borrowing will be increased. Earlier, the source was only the domestic economy and very significant foreign portfolio investors, very insignificant foreign portfolio investors. As a result of which, government had to increase their interest rate to attract investors in its government bond. Now it doesn't have to do it. It doesn't have to do it. Only by merely placing in the bond index, 10% of any investment that is coming into the bond index will eventually come into the Indian government bond, and it reduces the cost of borrowing for the government, and it's a good sign. Okay. And it reduces interest rates in the market. Of course, the interest rates in the market depend upon the long-term government security interest rate, 10-year government security or 9-year government security interest rate. Okay. In fact, that is also one of the benchmark for fixing the interest rates by the banks according to the external benchmark lending rate. Okay. Now, if the interest rates of government bonds reduces, this will compel other banks also to reduce their interest rate, and overall it reduces the interest rate in the domestic market, and it is a positive fallout of reduced cost of borrowings for the government. Okay. And increasing foreign portfolio investment, which we have already seen, it is going to increase foreign portfolio investment into India, because as we have said, any investment that comes into the bond index will eventually increase foreign portfolio investments into Indian government securities as well. And deepening of corporate bond market. Why? See, earlier when government wants to borrow, it used to issue government securities, and government securities has a very captive market in Indian economy. See, who purchases government securities? Banks. Why do banks purchase government securities? Because under SLR requirement, they have to maintain some amount in the liquid instruments like government securities. For liquid adjustment facility, they need to conduct repo and reverse repo transactions. They need government security as a collateral. Okay. And government securities are gilt-edged securities. As a result of which, if you don't want to reduce, if you want to reduce your risk, or if you want to reduce your provisioning coverage ratio, or if you want to reduce your overall capital adequacy ratio, you would invest in government securities rather than giving as loans to some other customers when the business is not doing good actually. So for all these reasons, governments actually purchase banks do purchase government securities, and even primary dealers are purchasing government securities. So in a way, government bonds are predominantly dominating the Indian bond market. There is hardly any space for corporate bond market. There are no investors for corporate bond market. Okay. Now government has got a separate market for its borrowing. It doesn't have to heavily depend on domestic market. Now it found a place, Indian government bond found a place in a bond index where it can attract foreign investors, so that it can vacate the domestic place for corporate bonds, and that will deepen the corporate bond market in India. This is a very important, very important for cost of financing, reducing the cost of financing for Indian companies. Okay. So the one more advantage is deepening of corporate bond market. Understood? and internationalization of Indian currency, more and more investments. What is internationalization of Indian currency? The currency performing its basic functions beyond its borders. Okay, so why do people want to invest in Indian currency? Only when they have confidence on Indian currency, and that confidence comes out of the confidence that the investors are showing on Indian government bonds. And we will see increasing interest of foreign investors in Indian government bonds because of this inclusion of IGP in international bond index. This will eventually pave way for internationalization of Indian currency, because India's credit rating and India's overall sovereign credit rating is going to be bettered, are going to be improved, and that will eventually result in internationalization of Indian currency. So these are the multifaceted advantages of inclusion of Indian government bonds in the JP Morgan bond index, and that is why it is considered as watershed moment in the Indian financial market, especially with respect to the Indian government bond. Okay, now it is not everything is hunky dory with respect to this. There are some potential risks, but that can be managed. But it is worthwhile to discuss these potential risks as well, because you never know, these statements can be asked in the prelims questions. Okay, what are the potential risks? First and foremost, currency appreciation. This is the impact of currency appreciation. Simple. Increasing FPI will eventually increase the demand for Indian currency, as a result of which the value of the currency is going to be appreciated, and this is a bad news for exports, as we have discussed. Currency appreciation, especially in the initial 1 or 2 years, we are going to see too much of currency appreciation, and RBI has to control this currency appreciation from time to time. If RBI has to control this currency appreciation from time to time, it has to change its forex currency. It has to spend a lot of money in terms of forex currency. Okay. Next, vulnerability to external factors. Foreign portfolio investors are very volatile. Foreign portfolio investments are very volatile, isn't it? So when we are depending upon foreign portfolio investments for government borrowing, we are exposing our market to the international risk. There is a reason why the 2008 global financial crisis could not destabilize Indian economy, because our economy, especially our financial markets, are not as dependent as other financial markets are on the global investors. But now, with increasing Indian government bond in international bond indices will integrate, so we will have to face the contagion risk eventually. So we are going to be more vulnerable to the external factors, isn't it? And conflict in the monetary policy priorities. Conflict in the monetary policy priorities is simple. RBI has dual objectives. One, the cost of one, it has to control the inflation. Second, it has to manage the public debt. Okay. When it has to manage the public debt, it manages the interest rates on the government securities. So it may improve or change the government security interest rates through open market operations by creating artificial demand or scarcity in the market. Now, with inclusion of IGB in JP Morgan bond index, the government bond index, the yield of government bond is going to be increased and decreased. It becomes pretty volatile, because sometimes you get more investments in the bond index, sometimes you don't get more investments in the bond index. So it may result in volatile government bond yield. Okay. Now, to reduce that volatility, RBI had to conduct open market operations. But while it has to conduct the open market operations, it has to let go of its objective of inflation control. So there is always a conflict of interest for Reserve Bank of India when it discharges these two functions, to reduce the inflation and also to reduce the cost of borrowings from the government by reducing the volatility of government bond yield. So this conflict is not something new. It is not something being erased out of this incident. This conflict has always been there, but that conflict is going to be exacerbated because of this, because this is going to make Indian government bond yield much more volatile. Okay. So now RBI has to face conflicts with its priorities, monetary policy priorities, and it depends on the RBI how it is going to walk this, how it is going to tread a fine balance between these two objectives. Okay. So these are the potential risks that may emanate. These are potential risks, definitely not potential risks that may emanate out of this. Okay. So let's answer some questions. Indian government bond yields are influenced by which of the following? Actions of the United States Federal Reserve, actions of the Reserve Bank of India, inflation and short-term interest rate. Obviously, actions of the United States Federal Reserve, because the change in the bond yield of US will have an impact on Indian government bond yield as well, because that will eventually result in net FPI inflows into Indian government bond. As a result, Indian government bond yields are also going to be changed. Actions of the Reserve Bank of India, of course, actions of the Reserve Bank of India. Whenever Reserve Bank of India conducts open market operations, or whenever Reserve Bank of India conducts expansionary monetary policy or contractionary monetary policy, it changes, it creates, it alters the demand. See, we have discussed this here in this case. See, expansionary monetary policy increases the demand, contractionary monetary policy decreases the demand for the bond. As a result, the bond yield decreases. Here, as a result, bond yield increases. So the bond yield changes with respect to the actions of the Reserve Bank of India. Pretty true. Inflation and short-term interest rates. Of course, the other two factors that we have discussed in the same slide, inflation and interest rates. Inflation and how inflation and interest rates impact the ultimate bond yield. So as all three are the reasons, so the answer is D. Okay. Now a similar question. Which of the following are most likely advantages of inclusion of Indian sovereign bonds in global bond indices? First, it reduces the cost of borrowing to the government. Yes, it reduces the cost of borrowing to the government. We have discussed it. It increases forex reserves. Does it? Yes, it increases forex reserves. See, increasing FPI will eventually increases forex reserves, isn't it? It's not a rocket science. So we'll get more and more foreign investment. So yes, it increases forex reserves. Okay. Increases exports. Does it? It has no direct relevance with respect to the exports. It doesn't increase exports. In fact, in the short term, due to the appreciation of Indian rupee, it may in fact negatively impact the exports, but as such, it has no direct relevance with respect to enhancing the exports. So the answer is 1 and 2 only. Okay. Fine. Next, foreign direct investment. Let's start with foreign direct investment. The foreign portfolio investment usually comes in instruments like shares, bonds, derivatives, etc. But foreign direct investment is always an equity investment. Foreign direct investment is always an equity investment. Let's differentiate foreign direct investment from FDI from FPI. Unlike FPI, FDI is an equity investment, which means any borrowing that is made by an Indian company from a foreign source is not considered as foreign direct investment. Any investment made by any foreign investors in the bonds of in the bond, because bond is a debt instrument, it is not considered as a foreign direct investment irrespective of the size of the investment. See, in equity, if it is more than 10%, it is considered as, if it is more than 10%, paid up capital, sorry, it is more than, greater than. If it is more than 10%, it is considered as FDI. But in bonds, no matter what the size of the investment, it is always considered as FPI, not FDI. So foreign direct investment is always non-debt creating investment. It is always non-debt creating. And unlike foreign portfolio investment, it is more or less permanent. We can call it semi-permanent or long-term in nature. They're not short term at least. They're long term. And investors in FDI investors will have a stake in the management, unlike foreign portfolio investment. Since they have management, they also bring other factors like technology and managerial practices with them to improve the business in which they are going to invest. Okay, so this is how foreign direct investment is different from foreign portfolio investment. Now, what all instruments come under foreign direct investment? How foreign direct investment can be made? In the equity, if the investment is more than 10% of the total paid up capital, then that is considered as foreign direct investment. See, we are talking about listed companies. What if the company is unlisted? See, only listed companies can issue shares in the stock market. Then a foreign investors can come and invest in below less than 10% or more than 10%. That's a different case. But what about unlisted companies? See, irrespective of the size of the investment, if any foreign investment is coming into the unlisted company, that is considered as foreign direct investment. So any foreign investment in an unlisted company, since it is unlisted, you are directly investing, and that is why it is called as foreign direct investment, unlike other investments where there is a threshold, because for a listed company there is a platform. Okay, so irrespective of the size of the investment. And other ways in which capital can be raised, foreign capital can be raised, like depository receipts or foreign currency convertible bonds, are also treated as FDI. We'll discuss what depository receipts and what foreign currency convertible bonds are. First of all, let's look at the trends of FDI. As such, there is nothing much that was given in the economic survey regarding foreign direct investment apart from this trend. Nothing is important from the examination point of view. Okay, because we have already discussed the global value chain topic, most of the points have been covered there, so there is nothing much that we can discuss here. So this is the thing. So share of the industry and service FDI in GDP, the FDI in service sector is more than the other industry sector, manufacturing sector. So that is the only key takeaway from this chart, nothing else. It keeps changing, but as of now, in the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen increasing share of services in FDI rather than industry. So the share of service FDI in GDP is much higher than share of industry FDI in GDP. That's it. That is the only key takeaway that is important from the examination point of view. Now let's discuss these two, depository receipts and FCCBs, because questions on these instruments have already been asked before. So we'll briefly discuss what depository receipts are, and then we'll come back to solving some questions. So global depository receipts. Global depository receipts. So if a manufacturing company, let's say company name is ABC, okay, company name is ABC Private Limited. This company wants to raise investment for its capital expansion. Okay, it wants to expand its business, so it wants to raise its investment. So there are two ways of raising investment, either through shares or bonds, by listing itself in the stock exchange. Let's say it went to Bombay Stock Exchange or National Stock Exchange, and it has listed its shares in the stock exchange, and investors would purchase these investments, and that is how this company is raising the investment. But the problem is there are hardly any takers for corporate bonds in the Indian market, isn't it? Or let's say Indian market is not that risk, not that accommodative for these kind of companies to raise the capital. Probably this company wants to diversify its capital, source of capital. So it has another other option. It can go to the foreign country and raise capital there, isn't it? So why can't it go to USA and go to the New York Stock Exchange and raise the capital? So it's not that easy. Getting listed in a foreign stock exchange, especially international stock exchange like in a New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange, is very difficult. You have to have operations in their particular locations, and you have to meet certain investment criteria. So it is not that easy for any company, any random company to get itself listed in New York Stock Exchange or international stock exchanges and raise the capital. So what's the way out? The way out is to find an intermediary who can do it for you. To find an intermediary in that particular location, let's say ABC company wants to raise capital from the US market, but it is not listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So probably it may seek the help of, let's say, some intermediary. That intermediary it is called as Overseas Depository Bank. Overseas Depository Bank. Let's take the case of Citibank. Let's take the case of Citibank. Citibank is a overseas depository bank, and this bank is listed on New York Stock Exchange. This bank is listed on New York Stock Exchange. So ABC Private Limited can seek the help of Citibank to raise the capital on behalf of ABC Private Limited because it is listed in the New York Stock Exchange. Seems like a good idea. Now the question is, how come? Now the question is, this ABC Private Limited will transfer its shares to this company Citibank or Overseas Depository Bank, which is listed in the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. Now what is the responsibility of this Overseas Depository Bank? As such, it cannot directly trade these shares in the New York Stock Exchange because these shares are not this company's, isn't it? So it has to list something else, or it has to trade some other shares on behalf of these shares, and these instruments are called depository receipts. These instruments are called depository receipts. Or DRs. And of course, the investors, they purchase these depository receipts, and this bank raises money, and this money is given to ABC company. It gives capital to this company. So if 100 crores worth of shares are given to this Overseas Depository Bank, this bank lists 100 crores worth of depository receipts in its own currency. See, these depository receipts are issued in USA by USA Bank in USA Stock Exchange in local currency, which is in dollars. And who is purchasing these depository receipts? Again, US investors. So the value of these depository receipts depend upon the performance of these underlying shares, isn't it? And that is why these depository receipts are called derivative instruments. Derivative instruments. Why do we call them derivative instruments? Because they derive their value based on the underlying assets. What is the underlying asset here? The shares that were transferred to this depository bank by the original company for which you are raising the capital. So the rate of returns for these investors who purchase these depository receipts issued by the Overseas Depository Bank on behalf of this ABC Private Limited ultimately depends upon the performance of this bank. That's it. These are depository receipts. Since these depository receipts are listed in New York Stock Exchange, or they're released by a US company, they're called American depository receipts. If they're listed in other countries, they're called global depository receipts. If they are listed in Indian company or in the Indian market, they are considered as Indian depository receipts. That's it. Okay, I'll just show you a table. You will have a better understanding. Global depository receipts. Who is issuing it? Who is issuing it? A foreign depository bank is issuing it, isn't it? For whom? Where is it issued? In a foreign stock exchange. Okay, in a foreign stock exchange. And issued in which currency? In foreign currency. And the capital is for whom? The capital is mobilized for a domestic company. An ABC Private Limited wants to mobilize the capital, but it is issued by this depository receipt is actually issued by a overseas offshore depository bank like Citibank or HDFC Bank. Okay. On the other hand, let's take the case of Indian depository receipt. If a foreign company wants to raise capital in the Indian market, but the foreign company do not find a place in Indian stock exchange, then it can take the help of Indian Depository Bank. The same way how the company ABC Private Limited took the help of Citibank, probably a company like Tesla can take the help of ICICI Bank located in India if it wants to raise capital from Indian market. So Indian depository receipts are issued by obviously Indian Depository Bank, issued in Indian stock exchanges and issued in Indian currency, and the capital is mobilized for whom? For a foreign company. Okay, so that's how global deposits are different from Indian depository receipts. So any depository receipt, any capital raised by an Indian company, in the form of depository receipts is considered as foreign direct investment in India. So that means here in this case, the capital raised by the ABC Private Limited in the form of global depository receipts is considered as foreign direct investment. It is foreign direct investment. Clear? So let us answer this question. Which of the following statements are correct about global depository receipts? It is a foreign currency denominated derivative instrument. It is a foreign currency denominated derivative instrument, right? It's a foreign currency denominated and derivative instrument because the depository receipts value ultimately depends upon the performance of the underlying asset. It is issued by a domestic company for trading on an international stock exchange. Issued by a domestic company. Is it issued by a domestic company? It is issued by a foreign depository bank. It is not issued by a domestic company. Domestic company only gives the shares to a overseas depository bank, but it is the overseas depository bank which issues it. Okay, so please read the statement carefully. Okay, the capital raised by an Indian company through the issue of GDRs in foreign markets is treated as foreign portfolio investment in India. Again, wrong. It is treated as foreign direct investment, not foreign portfolio investment. Okay, so the answer is A. Okay, let us answer few more questions. This was the previous year question 2020. With reference to foreign direct investment, which one of the following is considered as its major characteristic? It is an investment through capital instruments, essentially in a listed company. Is it right? The point is essentially in a listed company is wrong, because foreign direct investment may also come into the unlisted companies as well. If it is in the unlisted company, irrespective of the size of the investment, it is considered as foreign direct investment. It is largely a non-debt creating capital flow. Right. FDIs always comes in the form of equity, not in the form of debt. It is the investment which involves debt servicing. Wrong. It is the investment made by the foreign institutional investors in the government securities. Wrong. Okay. Again, which of the following is not considered as foreign direct investment? Which of the following is not considered as foreign direct investment? Foreign investment in unlisted company. See, any foreign investment is unlisted company is considered as FDI. Okay. External loans taken by a company. Yes. External loans taken by a company is never considered as a foreign direct investment because it is debt creating. And capital raised by a company by issuing depository receipts or foreign investment over 10% in a listed company. All these are foreign direct investments except the external loans taken by a company. So answer is B. Again, a previous year question, consider the following: foreign currency convertible bonds, foreign institutional investments with certain conditions, global depository receipts, non-resident external deposits. Which of the above can be included in the foreign direct investments? And it is also a question which was asked in 2021. So, foreign currency convertible bonds. As we have discussed, any capital raised by any company, either through deposit receipts or foreign currency convertible bonds, are treated as foreign direct investment. So, this is there. Foreign institutional investments with certain conditions. See, what he meant here is that foreign portfolio investment for more than 10%. That's what he meant. So, second statement is also considered as foreign direct investment. Global depository receipts, as we have discussed, that is also foreign direct investment. Non-resident external deposit is not a foreign deposit, foreign direct investment. Though it is a part of the capital account transaction, it is not considered as FDI. So the answer is 1, 2 and 3. So this is about foreign direct investment. If you wait for 10 more minutes, we'll wrap it up. Foreign currency convertible bonds. One more item of expenditure or item of investment which comes under foreign direct investment. So foreign currency convertible bonds are similar to, so what is a convertible bond basically? Convertible bond is a hybrid investment. See, generally a bond, when you invest in a bond, you frequently receive interest rates from time to time and you receive your principal amount at the date of the maturity. But a hybrid investment bond or a convertible bond is that bond which gives the option to the investor to turn the bond into an equity instrument like share, isn't it? So since this person has an option to change the bond instrument into an equity instrument, the interest rate that is given on this bond, on these convertible bonds, is relatively lesser than the interest rates that are normally given on a normal bond. Okay, so a foreign currency convertible bond is exactly a foreign currency version of the same convertible bond, is a foreign currency denominated convertible bond issued by an Indian company abroad. See, how can it issue an Indian company abroad? The way the global depository receipts are issued is completely different from how foreign currency convertible bonds are issued. Mostly they take the help of another company, but bonds are directly issued. No derivative instruments are traded on the stock exchange, just like in the case of global depository receipts. Okay, the mechanism is not very much important for the exam. It is just like the bonds are directly issued in the stock exchange, in the global stock exchange. That is why they're foreign currency denominated bonds. They're foreign currency denominated bonds. Now you get a question. You might ask a question that foreign direct investments comes in only in the equity form, not in the debt form. But bond is a debt instrument. How come capital raised by a bond is considered as a foreign direct investment? Because it is a convertible bond. Because it is a convertible bond, not optionally convertible bond, it is a mandatory convertible bond. That means the bond will definitely be converted into equity, and that is why it is considered as foreign direct investment. Normal bonds are never considered as part of foreign direct investment. As we have discussed earlier, foreign direct investment comes only in the form of equity. So it is a foreign currency denominated convertible bond. It is a hybrid instrument which the holder can convert into equity shares after a specified date. And these convertible bonds comes with lower interest rates rather than standard bonds. That's it. Now answer this question. With reference to the convertible bonds, consider the following statements. Number 1. As there is an option, it's a previous year question. As there is an option to exchange the bond for equity, convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. Obviously, since the investor has a flexibility to convert into equity, wherever the equity is giving a better rate of return, then definitely the bond issuer would be incentivized to raise this loan through convertible bonds at a cheaper interest rate. So yes, the interest rate is comparatively lower here. The second, the option to convert to equity affords the bondholder a degree of indexation to rising consumer prices. What does it mean? See, again, if you remember, the market value of the bond changes and the bond yield changes with respect to what? Inflation. With respect to inflation, the rate of returns would change. For example, let's say a bond's interest rate is always constant. Let's say a bond is giving a coupon rate of, let's say, 7%. Okay. But the inflation is 8%. So my rate of return is actually negative here. So I am getting negative rate of returns when the inflation is over and above the interest rate that I am receiving through my investment in the bonds. So this is the risk associated with bond, which is not there with equity, because the equity value increases with respect to the change in the rising inflation. The value of the equity also, the price of the share is also going to increase with increasing inflation. So equity instruments are relatively inflation hedged compared to bond investments. So when you have an option to convert your bond into an equity instrument, you can hedge your investment from the inflation risk, isn't it? So that's what the statement is saying. The option to convert equity affords the bondholder a degree of indexation to the rising consumer price. That means it is going to give him some immunity with respect to the inflation. Yes, this is true. This is true. So the answer is both 1 and 2. Okay, so this is about foreign direct investment. So tomorrow we'll discuss the rest of the current account, capital account transactions like net international investment position, external debt, and we'll discuss forex reserves as well. And then there is another chapter. We'll start another chapter, which is manufacturing industry, and that chapter is predominantly a mains oriented chapter. So that's it. That's it with the class. Anyways, thanks you guys. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow.